and that is the congressional action that took place in 2010. Actually, that which took place on March 23rd of 2010. I always like this actual slide. You notice the one gentleman right here, if I get the pointer to work, I guess I can. Gentleman in the middle with his hand right up, hanging over the side of the chair. That's my kind of congressman. That's the guy I would have been. Perfect. Just sit hitting out, relaxing. Actually, this particular photo was taken in the 30s with a very new, young president with an extremely difficult economic time and struggle that he was facing. Interesting how the more things change, the more they stay the same. Unfortunately, what we have is not necessarily what took place in FDR's time. We've got something that for the club industry is going to hurt a little more. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. I want you all to know that Washington, D.C. is very, very concerned with regard to the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And as you may notice, it's a mouthful. And what the Department of Health and Human Services has done, and this is right hand to God, I can't make this up, they have spent the last 2.5 to 3 weeks determining how they're going to actually use the acronym for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. That's been their concern. It started out PPACA, and then emails flew back and forth. You know, that's still too long. Great. They then cut it down to the ACA. And actually that went all the way up to Catherine Sebelius, the director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Secretary of the United States. She's determined that it's the ACA. How happy are we all? Come on, isn't that great? The tax money works. They determined it's the ACA. Well, unfortunately, what they really need to determine is exactly how much this is going to impact small business. Because as I went up on Capitol Hill and lobbied to make changes to this particular legislation, they didn't seem to get it. And let's go into why. First of all, the PPACA, or the ACA, requires that every club with 50 plus employees must provide, and I have to tell you, I never knew as much about expressing milk until I had to read the 2,732 pages of this bill. I don't know what to tell you guys, ladies, I don't know. This is what we've got. 50 plus employees, you must provide breaks for nursing employees to express milk. Now, not only do you have to provide that, which you already do. Everyone in this room is certainly compassionate and caring enough to provide an opportunity for an employee to express milk if she needs it. But now, the breaks must be provided for as long as she needs and as often as she needs. In addition, it must be for 1 year after the child's birth. So now the federal government is explaining how long you have to provide what is a normal benefit that you're going to provide your employee anyway. Outstanding. It gets better. You must provide a location that is shielded from view and free from intrusion. How many of you have locker rooms in your clubs? Nobody? Again, where's the mimosos? They said there were mimosos on the table. You may not use a locker room. How many of you have locker rooms that you could actually entertain in? Right? You spend a lot of time and a lot of money making sure your locker rooms are good. Those are unacceptable. You do not have to have a specific and created location for expressing milk, but you must designate a room and have it available when needed. Clubs with less than how many have less than 50 employees in their club? You may be exempt. Look at me, I'm your lawyer. Do not accept this exemption. If you do, you will be nailed by the Department of Labor. You will have to prove undue hardship. You must prove that there is an extreme difficulty and extreme expense for you to comply with this particular regulation. As such, there is no exemption, basically. How about this? Clubs must provide these breaks to non-exempt employees. So what that means is that the lady standing at the front desk, probably an hourly worker, gets the break, but your CFO doesn't. What? The federal government has now said that your hourly wage employees can get it, but your senior executives can't. Classic. Additionally, do we have any CFOs in the audience or accountants? We all understand that if you have a minimal amount of time for your hourly workers, less than 20 minutes, they take a break, you still have to pay them. Well, the federal government has now said under the PPACA, guess what? We're going to basically throw that out. No requirement to pay the employee during the breaks, even if it's less than 20 minutes. Traditionally, if it's 20 minutes or less, you pay your employee. So that's out the window. Congratulations. So they've actually changed, in essence, the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act. Federal law, though, get this, does not supersede state law. So New York has a broader definition, indicates exactly what can and cannot be done with regard to women who need to express milk. And it's better than what the federal government provides under the Affordable Care Act. You got to do what New York State says. So now you got to look at 2 laws to determine what's best for your employees. When all the while, what were you doing? The right thing for your employees, right? Finally, understand that this is enforced under the Fair Labor Standards Act, which means a potential penalty of an injunction, maybe a fine of $1,100, and of course attorney's fees. And that means that the employee certainly has the desire and probably the more compunction to go to Tom or to myself and get a lawyer because it doesn't cost them anything. So, I bring this up as right out of the gate so you understand a little bit about PPACA. Does anybody have a question with regard to this? Understanding that the PPACA was created to insure 32 million Americans who didn't have insurance. Any question about this particular aspect of the law and the tenet of it? Thank you for laughing. This has nothing to do with healthcare, does it? This is the problem of the PPACA for private clubs. How about the employer mandates? In addition to expressing milk, you must, of course, as you all heard, disclose the total cost of health insurance premiums on your employees' W-2 forms. Well, that won't take any time. I'm sure it'll be easy for you and your CFOs to do, right? And most importantly, of course, we've all heard the 1099 requirements. I assume you've all heard the 1099 requirement, correct? Any purchase in an aggregate over the year of over $600 means you must provide a 1099 to that vendor and to the IRS. Now, occasionally, I think outside the box, and I just wonder how this will affect private clubs. Some clubs, I don't know, and maybe not in New York or Jersey or in Connecticut, but some clubs actually purchase liquor. And maybe that's a little more than $600. Some of them purchase flowers, maybe a little more. So you can see, from steak to fish to produce, you name it. Now you have to track it, provide a 1099. Most importantly, you know what you have to provide? A tax ID number. Now, if you use a purveyor who is a sole practitioner or a sole proprietor, and that tax ID number is a social security number, you now have security interests and concerns. I've got to make sure that I maintain that number for the 1099, but I can't let it out of my sight, in essence, right? Can't lose the social security number or you'll be in trouble. Any questions about what this has to do with 32 million uninsured? See where we're going? Representative Dan Lundgren from California and Senator Mike Johanns each filed companion bills to repeal the 1099. In the United States House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House knew that this would lose, that it would win, she would lose. That the House of Representatives would pass the repeal. So she put in a requirement that this particular repeal be done under what's called suspension, which just simply means it needs a supermajority. It lost by 20 votes. That's it. In the United States Senate, they voted as soon as they came back from their August break. First thing out of the box. Senator Johanns' measure came up, lost. 7 Democrats voted for it. 7 Democrats voted for this. Went down. Senator Mary Landrieu from Louisiana said, you know what? I didn't vote for it, but it is absolutely the wrong thing to have because small business will be penalized for it. But we're not going to change it now. It'd be too easy to do so now. Well, wait, because it only comes into effect in 2012. This is the mentality we're dealing with. They understand it's wrong. They know that it's going to impact small business. It will be a cost and a drag on the economy. It won't help us create jobs in private clubs or any industry. And yet, unfortunately, they won't change it. That's the difficulty, and that's telling as we think about all the other issues that are far more important that will affect private clubs as we go down this list. How about the most important stuff? All of you have 50 or more, basically most of you have 50 or more full-time employees. As such, you must provide insurance to those full-time employees starting in 2014. But what do they define full-time employee as? This is what's interesting. Again, the federal government has now changed the definition of full-time and indeed what makes up a month. First of all, full-time. How many of you recall that full-time was 40 hours a week for an employee? Back in the day, right? What was it, 10 years ago? Maybe now we accept 35, take an hour off for lunch every day. 35, right? Under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, a full-time employee is defined as one who works 30 hours a week during any month. Here's the $64,000 question. How many weeks in a month? Anyone? 4.3. Federal government said that is really a lot of math. So what we're going to do now is make it 4. So the federal government has said that your full-time employee is one who works at least 30 hours per week during any 4 weeks for a month. You got to be kidding. Does anybody know that's a little peculiar? Where's the nodding now? That's amazing. But that's what this law has now done. So to provide insurance, they again changed the Fair Labor Standards Act, changed the way we all determine exactly what is full-time, but it only applies to whether you have to provide insurance. Okay, well what if you decided the smart thing, and I'll make some part-time employees, right? They don't have to be at 30 hours, they're at 29 hours. That individual is full-time. Guess what? They're smart. They're smart up there in DC. Now they determine, guess what? Part-time employees are going to be counted as well. How do you do it? You simply follow a federal formula, a plan. This is easy. A federal formula, come on. How hard is a federal formula, right? First thing you do, take the total hours worked by those part-timers in a month. How many weeks a month? 4. And you divide by 120. Why? 30 hours a week. Even I know this. 30 times 4, 120. You take the total hours a week by those part-timers, total for the month, divide it by 120, and then you add that number to your full-time employees, those who do work 30 hours for a month. If you're over 50, you must provide insurance, but only to the full-time employees. So you count the part-timers, but you don't offer them insurance. Clear as mud, isn't it? Aren't you happy? You're gonna kill Jay. Thanks for putting Brad first, Jay. This is great. Clubs that meet the 50 full-time employee threshold and that do not provide insurance. So basically everybody in this room. You're all at 50, but you don't offer insurance, let's say. The penalty is $2,000 per full-timer. But the government says, don't worry about it. Hey, I got the first 30, it's on me. Don't worry about it. First 30 on me. Got 100? Don't worry. You pay $2,000 for the 70. I pick up the first 30, because I like it. Now here's the question. The question becomes this. If one employee enrolls in the exchange plan and is entitled to receive a tax credit or a subsidy. Now you may ask yourself, well, how the hell is he supposed to get a tax credit or a subsidy? That's a great question. That's great. But we'll get to it. How about this? How about for everybody in the room right now who does offer insurance? So not only are you over 50, but you do offer insurance. You're not going to drop your plan. The penalty is $3,000 for each employee, not all of them, each employee who decides to go to the exchange and does qualify for the exchange's tax credit or subsidy. Again, the question is, well, how does he get a tax credit or a subsidy? Well, this is how I get it. And again, it's very easy. Because the federal government did it, it's very simple to determine how your employee would be eligible for a tax credit or a subsidy. First, we determine whether the employee's household income is no more than 400% of the federal poverty limit. For a family of 4, that's $88,200. Now I've placed in italics and in bold the word household, because this is how Tom makes a lot of money. Because Tom's going to get a phone call, and he's going to hear this on the other end. Well, Tom, here's what I did. I kind of asked my employee, John, to come into my office. I said, John, you're doing a great job. Thank you for working at the pool, been outstanding and super. But by the way, what's your wife make a year? Not the first thing that Tom wants to hear anyone saying to his or her employee. So it's great. Well, what's your whole family making? Then just give me your entire information. So how the hell is anybody going to figure out what household income is? Does anybody have? I'm honestly looking. I spend too much time with accountants, let alone lawyers, and we're also racking our brain. How can we have the general manager make a determination of what would be household income? Anybody got an idea? Affidavits. Exactly. Then Tom would be getting a lot of money. He's like, yes. See Tom shake his head. This is why I want to go back in private practice. Make a lot of money on this one. That's right. Good. What club is that? Not enough money in that club. I'm kidding. I'm joking. So the reality is we have no way of knowing how the household income is going to be determined. We don't know when it's going to happen. However, we may be responsible for $2,000 in this scenario, for $2,000 an employee, in the event one employee goes and meets this requirement. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a knock on the door. Hi, I'm the IRS. I'm here to collect $140,000 if you've got 100 employees and one of them goes and you don't offer insurance. Waive the first 30, 70 times 2,000, 140. Just write a check, they'll say. If you got it in cash, we'll take that too. You'll have no idea. How about for, again, all of you who do offer insurance, right now you don't change the way you do business. You're going to continue to provide insurance for your employees. But one employee decides, well, I'm not going to accept the insurance the club is offering. Okay? We have to first determine whether he's going to get that tax credit or a subsidy. Number one, is he eligible because he has a household income of no more than 400% of FPL? Again, 88.2. And one of the other two things must happen. First, his premium cost is 9.5% of that household income. Again, very simple to determine. Very easy. 9.5% of that household income, or about $8,400. If that's the case, the insurance that your club is offering is unaffordable. He can go to the exchange and will be eligible for a tax credit or a subsidy. If he takes that tax credit or subsidy, you then get billed $3,000 as a fine. The other opportunity for him to get the tax credit will be if the offered health plan that you provide, it provides less than 60% to 40% health coverage. No one in this room should ever have a policy that provides for less than 60% payment of medical expenses. If you do, you're in a world of hurt under this legislation. Just don't do it. I don't think any of you do. I don't want to get into why, but just don't do it. Look at me. Don't do it. Not good. Like almost like Bill Clinton there, or George Herbert Walker Bush, not going to do it. Send James Baker out there with a probe, see what's going on with the Israelis and everybody else. You might have a little laughter. Come on, it's early in the freaking morning. Come on. Any unused tax credit that the individual receives is refundable. He can get that money. So if he gets the tax credit, pays for the insurance, he can pocket if he's got some left over. He can pocket it. So there is an incentive for the individual actually to not only take advantage of getting the tax credit, but also he might get some money. Charming. All right. So it seems pretty clear we know what happens. We got to avoid having those employees who go to the exchange and get the tax credit or subsidy. And again, we follow that simple plan of finding their household income, and we'll be able to determine whether they're going to do it. Well, the federal government says, I don't like the fact that some businesses would have the opportunity to actually pay a penalty of $3,000 if they offer insurance, or $2,000 if they choose not to offer insurance. That's not right, because I think some of those employers would take advantage of that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to demand and require that every single employer in the United States still provide insurance to those individuals who are at least pay for it if their individual employees go to the exchange, because the premium that they would have to pay at their boss, at their business, will be between 8% and 9.8%. Now remember I said 9.5%? It's unaffordable. Now I said 9.8%, because we don't want you hovering around 9.6%. We don't want you turning around making the employee contribution percentage 9.6, 9.7% of the household income. Because then you'd only be fined $3,000. It's pretty cheap, right? So the government said, not so fast. Here's how we fix it. If an individual has that household income of no more than 400% of FPL, and the premium cost is between 8% and 9.8% of that household income, about $7,100 to $8,600, and they turn down the plan, guess what they get? They get to go to the exchange, they get to purchase insurance, and you still pay the employer contribution amount. What the hell? You just said it. That doesn't make any sense. So you still get to pay it. Even better, guess what you get? If they purchase a plan that is less than your percentage, which you usually pay, they pocket the difference. So your employer you pay the money to the exchange, the employee purchases a plan that's maybe $2,000 less, and he gets the $2,000. Do you think there's an incentive for him to go to that? Maybe just a little bit. How about I've got an example. I use this usually. We're short on time, so I don't want to take up too much. But if you go to, actually, in all seriousness, $15,000 in appropriate total premium for a family plan in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area? Yes? Let's say that you've got an employer who's paying 66% of that. Employer pays $10,000. Employee percentage would be $5,000, or 33%. If you've got an employee making $100,000, there's a wife to stay at home with 2 kids, clearly that individual does not satisfy the free choice voucher. $100,000 making over 400% of federal poverty limit, more than 88.2. But how about this scenario? You got an employee making $40,000 a year. All of you are shaking your heads. And a wife who works part-time making $20,000 a year and 2 kids. That individual's making $60,000 a year. That family, that household income. Of course, you never know what the housewife is making, wife is making. But let's just say somehow you divine it and figure out that it's 20 grand. So the total household income is 60,000. Clearly, that's less than 400% of the federal poverty limit. And obviously, if they have to pay $5,000 as the employee contribution for the family plan, that's about 8.3% of their household income going to health insurance premium. That's between 8 and 9.8%. That individual goes to the exchange, and you pay $10,000. So the choice you really have is this. Number one, do we drop all insurance completely and pay a $2,000 fine on every employee minus the first 30? Do we wait to see how many individuals, when we offer insurance, decline it, and we pay $3,000 as a penalty while still offering insurance to all of our employees at a family plan of $10,000 a pop? Or third, we leave it just like this and allow some of our individuals to get the free choice voucher. They don't even use the plan that I've accepted, that you've accepted as the employer, and you still pay the 10 grand. 2,000, 3,000, or 10,000. Yeah, not much of it. No. Next slide, Brad. We've got that one. Pretty straightforward. That's the reality of this new law starting 2014. Every club will have to make a determination of exactly what their community will provide. Will my community and other employers take the economic route and say, I'd rather pay 2 grand? How about if you pay $5,000 or $10,000 for the employer contribution? Pay $2,000, don't provide any more insurance. Pay 2 grand to the government, right? That leaves you $8,000. You got 10 that you pay on insurance, take away 2 to the government. Leaves you 8. You give every single employee in the club a $5,000 raise. 5 and 2, $7,000. You had 10 that you were going to pay on insurance. Leaves you with $3,000 in your pocket. Interesting. How many of your employees would like a $5,000 raise? One? Just one? That's just wing foot. They have blinds. Seasonal workers. Those of you who have seasonal workers understand this. They don't classify them. I know it's hard, but don't classify them as seasonal workers anymore. Don't call them that anymore. Dump that phraseology. It is no longer appropriate. If you've got more than 50 full-time employees, as defined under the PPACA, and you hire folks to work during the high season, if they're working full-time, you got to offer them insurance. Plain and simple. I don't care if they're H-2B, F1, if they're students coming in for 2 months, 3 months, or 1 month. Doesn't matter. You must offer them insurance because you've already reached the threshold. You've got 50 employees. If you've got less than 50 full-time employees, the question then becomes, how long are those workers going to be on your property? If they're there for less than 120 days, you don't have to offer them insurance. If they're there for more than 120 days, you do have to offer them insurance. Here's the biggest question we're running into with regard to seasonal worker. Right now, as it's defined, the regulations are being tweaked. I know, because I'm stuck in the middle of negotiations and it ain't fun. Seasonal worker is one who performs labor or services on a seasonal basis. Does that mean a private club that hires 3 more or 2 more lifeguards because he's got a higher census at the pool versus, let's say, a seasonal time to create roads in Alaska, 3 days? Right? We all know it took 3 days to create a road in Alaska. That's a seasonal period. Ain't no way around it. But is it truly a seasonal worker if we only hire someone because of a higher census? And that's the argument we're having right now with the Department of Labor. So understand, we may not even have these rules for those clubs that are less than 50 full-timers because seasonal worker may not even apply to us. So, as I say, at this point, those of you all basically have more than 50 full-time employees. Don't think about seasonal workers as seasonal workers. Think about full-time. Are you going to hire them 30 hours or not? That's the issue. Probationary periods. Sure, I thought we were done at 9. Oh, were we or not? Sure. Yeah, I think we're good. Clubs. Probationary period. Clubs with 20 or less, or 200 or less employees, you may have up to 90 probationary days. That's what you can have. Congratulations. How many have more than 90 days currently that you provide for a probationary period? Anybody? Good. If you've got more than 200 full-time employees, you are allowed no probationary period whatsoever. Nothing. 0. So as such, understand, if you've got more than 200 and you've been offering a probation or providing a probationary period, you don't have to start paying for insurance and all benefits earlier. All of this, again, begins 2014. Understand. That's just on you. How about on your individual members? You know, those folks who pay the salaries for all of the staff? Number 1, I do 3.8% tax on interest, income, and dividend money. How many of you have retirees who utilize the club? Anybody? Guess what? They probably do so by using dividends. Now there's a brand new 3.8 tax on that for those making $200,000 or $250,000 per year. That starts 2013. This is obviously on top of capital gains and on the income tax. How about this? Those individuals who are not retired Those individuals who are still earning a paycheck, making $200,000 a year or a family $250,000. They have nearly 1% increase in the Medicare payroll tax. 1% Medicare payroll tax. First time in the United States history, they've increased the Medicare payroll tax, and it's not going to Medicare trust fund. I'll say it again. It's not going to Medicare trust fund. It's going to healthcare. This healthcare plan, the PPACA. You all need to begin discussions with your finance committees to determine exactly what you can do to offset this decrease in revenue. With the payroll tax alone, just the payroll tax, that 1% Medicare payroll tax, I'm talking with 50 families that make $250,000 a year could lose over $100,000. How many got $100,000 in the slush fund? Nobody? Definitely Wingfoot has that. There, he just doesn't think funds here. The reality is, that's a significant sum. If those individuals decide that what they're doing is going to take that money that's now going to the federal government, and they would have spent it at your club, Wednesday night prime rib dinner night, they may not come to the club. They may take that night off and using the club services. That's revenue in your pocket. Just 50 families. Just 50 could lose you over $100,000. In addition, you got indirect fees and taxes on private clubs. Not only do you have your employer mandates, not only do you have your individual members who are getting whacked, you're going to have additional costs. Why? A fee on drug manufacturers on all items sold, 2011. A 2.9 tax on medical device makers. Starts in 2013. Insurance company fee, 2014. Now, we got no love for insurance companies unless there's anybody from an insurance company in here. The reality is we know there's a problem, but guess what happens with all those fees? Do you think the insurance company will say, I'll take one for the team. I caused the problem, I'll absorb that fee. Thanks, guys, don't worry about it. Or are they going to pass that fee on to those who are paying the premiums? So the reality is all of these costs will be flowed through to your premiums. So you've got less revenue coming in because of taxes. And you're going to have higher premiums based on the fact that there are additional costs that every actuary will have to take into consideration when he determines what a price should be for a premium each year. Make sense? Aren't we happy? Isn't this the greatest law in the world? Happy days. Grandfather plans, and I'll finish up. Grandfather plans are even better. Every plan that was in existence on March 23, 2010, don't worry. If you keep it the same, guess what? You can have it for the rest of your life. Ad infinitum. No changes to the plan. That's all right. You're okay. It's grandfather. It's perfect. There's a problem, though. How many of you determined that maybe, just maybe, I have to adjust some things to keep the costs down? Potentially, maybe increase the co-insurance percentage, maybe increase the deductibility, increase the co-pays, maybe even decrease the premium contribution that you guys make, and have a little more for your employees. Make sense? If you do any of that, the plan is no longer grandfather. Period. If it's no longer grandfather, it must comply with every single requirement under the PPACA. How about this major factor? You can imagine that since every plan has to comply in 2014 with PPACA, most insurance carriers are going to say, why am I going to offer a plan that no longer complies with federal regulations and requirements? So the plan you like, even if you keep it the same, may actually no longer be offered because the insurance company may say, I'm just not going to offer that anymore. It's a pain in my butt to deal with 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 clubs or businesses that choose that plan. I'm just going to drop it completely. And at the end of the year, you're not going to have that opportunity to renew it. Aren't you happy? Weren't we told? What were we all told about our plans? Well, there it is. If you like it, you can keep it. Unless you want to do the appropriate thing and keep some costs in control, or unless your insurance company says, we're really not going to offer this anymore because it's not economically viable for us as a business, which makes sense. It's a product they no longer want to sell. Senator Mike Ainslie actually filed a resolution to remove these regulations, and the United States Senate voted it down. Voted it down. Even though, if you like the plan, you can keep it. HHS has said, this is not from me. This is not a survey that the National Club Association did. This is coming from the Department of Health and Human Services, and it said 69% of all businesses and 80% of small businesses will likely lose their insurance. So there's a lot that we're going to have to deal with. Absolute lot that you're all going to have to deal with. You need to start taking into consideration now the costs, the realities, and what this means for your individual members and for your employees. How much fun has this been? Come on, I'm expecting a standing ovation. Thank you all. Any questions?